Diana here to talk about that all-American booze-filled tradition marking the beginning of warmer weather, Cinco de Mayo. Cinco de Mayo, of course, comes from Mexico, but it is much more popular and widely celebrated in the US. Not to be confused with Mexico's Independence Day, Cinco de Mayo commemorates the unlikely victory of a much smaller, poorly equipped Mexican force against the larger and better armed French on the 5th of May in 1862 in the city of Puebla. So why is Cinco de Mayo so big in the US while it's not really celebrated in Mexico outside of the city of Puebla where the battle took place? And is the Battle of Puebla's proximity to the American Civil War merely a coincidence, or were the two countries' fates intertwined, and that's why the holiday is now so big in the US? Or is Cinco de Mayo's popularity just clever marketing from beer companies trying to import that sweet, sweet Mexican cerveza to the US? Let's find out in this mestizo episode on Cinco de Mayo, or should we say, Gringo de Mayo? First, a bit of history. Like in the US, Mexico celebrates the day it declared its independence. Mexico declared its independence from Spain on September 16, 1810, not Cinco de Mayo, and won its independence 11 years later. Around this time, nearly all Spanish colonies throughout Latin America had also become independent or were close to becoming independent from Spain. In 1823, US President and inventor of doctrines, James Monroe, articulated his foreign policy position that opposed any European interference in the Western Hemisphere. This would become known as the Monroe Doctrine. In 1861, the Monroe Doctrine was put to the test when French forces under Napoleon III invaded Mexico. While the US denounced this invasion as a violation of the doctrine, the US wasn't really able to intervene because of the American Civil War. Napoleon III invaded Mexico under the pretext that Mexico hadn't paid its foreign debt, which in all fairness, it hadn't. But rather than negotiate terms like Spain and Britain did, Napoleon pushed on in order to establish his Mexican empire. The French landed at Veracruz and were confident that they would easily crush the Mexicans, as France had been undefeated in battle for almost 50 years. French commander Charles de Lourençay was so cocky, in fact, that he boasted, quote, "We are so superior to the Mexicans in race, organization, morality, and devoted sentiments that I beg your excellency to inform the emperor that as head of 6,000 soldiers, I am already master of Mexico." However, the French army soon encountered heavy resistance from the Mexicans at the city of Puebla. The ragtag Mexican army of 4,000 men was led by Generals Ignacio Zaragoza and Porfirio Diaz. On May 5th, 1862, the Mexicans decisively defeated the French. This astounding underdog victory gave Mexicans a much-needed morale boost and deeply embarrassed the French on the world stage. While all this was happening, north of the border, the American Confederacy had been courting the French to help them win the Civil War. And by the time the Battle of Puebla rolled around, the Confederacy had won multiple battles, making it a much more attractive candidate for French aid. According to some historians, the French could have used Mexico as a base from which they provided aid to the Confederacy. Historian Justo Sierra went as far as to suggest that had the Mexicans not defeated the French in Puebla, the US would look very different today. The Mexican victory at Puebla, however, stopped the French long enough for the Union Army to gain momentum and eventually relegated the Confederacy to the history books. Unfortunately, this was truly a case of winning the battle but losing the war, as Napoleon didn't easily give up on his dreams of a Mexican empire. A year after the Battle of Puebla, the French defeated the Mexican army, captured Mexico City, and installed Maximilian I as the short-lived emperor of Mexico. To finish this rollercoaster of emotions off, by 1865, the Civil War was over. Spoiler alert, the Confederacy lost. Seriously, guys, it's over. And the US quickly garrisoned an army on the Mexican border. Facing mounting pressure, Napoleon III finally retreated from Mexico shortly thereafter. All of this history, however, doesn't really answer the question, why is Cinco de Mayo so popular in the US, where even the good old Southern boys love them some Mexico on Cinco de Mayo? Cinco de Mayo's celebratory roots in the US come from California, where the holiday has been celebrated annually since the Civil War. UCLA professor David Hayes Bautista explains that due to their mestizo origins, Latino Californians weren't really down with the Confederacy and its agenda of slavery expansion to the newly minted American state. Moreover, Given Napoleon's support of the Confederacy, they saw the Mexican victory at Puebla as intrinsically tied to the Union's own efforts in halting the spread of slavery. And so, when news of the victory at the Battle of Puebla reached the American West, Latinos broke out in spontaneous fiesta, as we're prone to do. He goes so far as to argue that Cinco de Mayo is not a Mexican holiday, it is an American Civil War holiday. By the 1940s, during the rise of the Chicano movement, Cinco de Mayo celebrations had spread outside of California. The holiday then became associated with Mexican-American culture, and by the 1950s and 60s, Cinco de Mayo had become popular in cities nationwide where there were large Mexican-American communities. It wasn't until the 1980s, however, that the celebration went truly mainstream through the ultimate American ideal. No, not freedom or democracy, but rather capitalism. The 1980s brought large numbers of immigrants across the border, and major corporations targeted this lucrative new demographic by promoting Cinco de Mayo. Key among these companies was Grupo Modelo, makers of Corona beer. Corona entered the US market in 1979, and by the mid-1980s, sales of the beer served with the lime skyrocketed. In just 2 years, sales of Corona rose tenfold. By 2001, the Drinko for Cinco spent $1 on Cinco de Mayo promotions for every case of beer sold. And that investment has paid off, as American consumers reportedly now drink more beer on Cinco de Mayo than any other holiday, including St. Patrick's Day and the Super Bowl. Yikes. Today, thanks to savvy marketing and any excuse to throw a fiesta, Cinco de Mayo is celebrated worldwide in places like Canada, Australia, Tokyo, and strangely enough, Paris. Do they know? As beer companies have successfully commercialized Cinco de Mayo, its connection to the Battle of Puebla has been diminished. Cinco de Mayo's historical ties to the US, and California in particular, are significant contributing factors as to why the holiday took root in the US. Millions of advertising dollars later, however, and Cinco de Mayo's significance is often lost. So this Cinco de Mayo, consider pouring one out for that ragtag Mexican army that fought for freedom. But what do you guys think? Does all of this sound like a massive conspiracy theory 150 years in the making just to suck the fun out of Cinco de Mayo? Or is the Battle of Puebla an American holiday that celebrates freedom and democracy prevailing both in Mexico and in the US? And should it be treated as such? And will beer companies continue their stranglehold over Cinco de Mayo just to sell more beer? Let us know what you think in the comments. Smash that like and subscribe button like it's a French invader. Thank you so much for watching. Adios.